If you are a horror fan, especially of horror movies around this time, you are going to love this story. So stick around and please get this up to 60 likes so that I know that y'all enjoy these stories. Without any further ado, as of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go. Born Edward Theodore Gein on August 27, 1906 in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Ed became of age under the influence of his religious and domineering mother, Augusta. She raised Ed and his brother Henry to believe that the world was full of evil, and that women were vessels of sin, and that drinking and immortality were the instruments of the devil. So, frantic to protect her family from the evil which she believed lurked around every corner, Augusta insisted that they move from La Crosse, which she called a sinkhole of filth, and she thought they'd move to Plainfield instead. But once they got there, even there, Augusta had the family settle outside of the town since she believed that living in town would corrupt her two young sons. As a result, Ed Gein only ever left his family's isolated farmhouse to go to school, but he failed to establish any meaningful connections with his classmates, who remembered him as socially awkward and prone to odd and unexplained fits of laughter and anger. What's more, Ed's lazy eye and speech impediment made him an easy victim to the bullies, so he would get tossed into lockers, barely being able to breathe inside. But despite all this, Ed loved his mother almost to the point of obsession. His father was just a timid alcoholic who died in 1940, and he cast a much smaller shadow over his life. But when it came to his mother, Augusta, he absorbed her lessons about the world and seemed to embrace her worldview. Though Henry sometimes stood up to Augusta, Ed Gaines never did. I mean, Ed did endure a difficult childhood. His father was an alcoholic and his mother was verbally abusive toward him, but he nevertheless idolized her, a fact that apparently concerned his older brother Henry, who, like I said, would occasionally confront her in Ed's presence. Now, Henry, likely trying to be the older brother that protected his younger brother Ed, most likely thought that he was sticking up for him and would gain his respect and would finally draw some boundaries between them and their mother. But standing up for her could possibly have been his downfall. Because in 1944, while World War II was scorching on the other side of the earth, Ed and Henry set out to clear some vegetation in their fields by burning it away. Harmless enough, right? But fate would have it that something else that night happened, and only one of the brothers would live through it. You see, as they were working, a fire suddenly got out of control. And when firefighters arrived to the scene and put out the blaze, Ed told them that Henry had vanished, almost as if in the distance he went hazy into a mirage and then fully disappeared. Although Ed reported his brother missing to the police, he was able to lead them directly to the burned body when they arrived. And Henry was face down in the marsh, dead from asphyxiation. Despite bruises discovered on the victim's head, the death was ruled an accident. So it's perhaps not a surprise that Ed Gein's first victim was likely his older brother, Henry. I mean, at the time it seemed like a tragic accident, but accidental or not, Henry's death meant that Ed Gein and his mother Augusta had the farmhouse to themselves, where they lived there in isolation for about a year, until Augusta's death in 1945. You could call this the catalyst to what made him a monster, because then Ed Gein began his decade-long descent into darkness and depravity. Losing his mother was too much. And it wasn't just love, it was more of an infatuation such that the world might have never seen before. And following Augusta's death, Ed Gein transformed the house into something of a shrine of her memory. He boarded up rooms that she used, keeping them all in pristine condition, and he moved into a small bedroom outside the kitchen. Meanwhile, the rest of the house was a total mess. So, living alone, far from town, he began to sink into his obsessions. Ed filled his days by learning about Nazi medical experiences, studying human anatomy, and consuming sexual images, even though he never attempted to date any women in real life. And also, one of his favorite things to do in the world was to read horror novels. And then he also began to indulge in his sick fantasies, but it took a long time for anyone to realize it. Yes, for a full decade, no one thought much about the Gein farmhouse outside of town. But everything changed in November 1957 when a local hardware store owner named Bernice Warden just vanished, leaving nothing behind but a community on edge and a bunch of blood stains near the counter. And then we have Frank Warden, who told investigators that on the evening before his mother's disappearance, Gein had been there in the store and was to have returned the next morning for a gallon of antifreeze. And a sales slip or receipt for the antifreeze was the last receipt written by Warden on the morning that she disappeared. So police doing their job went to Ed's farmhouse to investigate, and found themselves in the middle of a waking nightmare. There, authorities found what would later inspire horror movies such as Silence of the Lambs, Psycho, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is a warning. What I am about to describe could be extremely graphic to some viewers. So if you are squeamish, click off now and watch one of my other videos. Okay, as soon as investigators stepped into Ed Gein's house, they found Bernice Warden in the kitchen. She was dead, decapitated, and hung by her ankles from the rafters. But then there were countless bones, both whole and fragmented, skulls impaled on his bedposts, and bowls and kitchen utensils made from skulls. Worse than the bones, however, were the household items that Ed had made out of human skin. Authorities found the chairs upholstered in human skin, a wastebasket made of skin, leggings made from human leg skin, and masks made from faces. Now you might see where Texas Chainsaw Massacre comes into play. But he also made other stuff like a belt made of nipples, a pair of lips being used as window shade drawstring, a corset made of a female torso, and of course a lampshade made from a human face. I dropped a short a couple months back called The Hyena of Auschwitz, where she made a skin lamp, but she ain't got nothing on Ed Gein's. Because along with the skin items, police found various dismembered body parts, including fingernails, 4 noses, and the genitals of 9 different women. They also found the remains of Mary Hogan, a tavern keeper who had gone missing in 1954. And Ed readily admitted that he'd collected most of the remains from 3 local graveyards, which he'd started to visit 2 years after his mother's death. He told police he'd gone to the graveyards in a daze, looking for bodies that he thought resembled his mother. But Ed also explained why. He told authorities that he wanted to create a woman suit so that he could become his mother and crawl into her skin. So following the police visit to Ed Gein's house, he was dubbed the Butcher of Plainfield, and he was now arrested. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity in 1957 and sent to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, where he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Then his farmhouse mysteriously burned to the ground. So like I said, he was not guilty in 1957. But then in 1960, 3 years later, the movie Psycho, which was about Norman Bates, was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. and based on also Robert Bloch's powerful 1959 book when it was released. Now, are you starting to see a connection with Norman Bates yet? I hope so. It took a whole decade, yes, 10 years before Ed was deemed fit to stand trial and was convicted of the murder of Bernice Worden. But just of Bernice Worden. He was never tried for Mary Hogan's murder because the state allegedly saw it as a waste of money. Ed was insane, they reasoned. He would spend the rest of his life in hospitals either way, they say. But that raises a chilling question. How many people did Ed Gein really kill? Until his death in 1984 at the age of 77, he only ever admitted to murdering Worden and Hogan, both of them who looked extremely like his mother. The other bodies, and police found as many as 40 in his home. He claimed that, he just picked and robbed from graves. Was he telling the truth, or did he kill them? As such, we may never know how many people fell victim to the Butcher of Plainfield, but it is certain that Ed Gein stands out as one of history's most disturbing serial killers. He's also the inspiration for the mother-loving Norman Bates of Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre skin-wearing Leatherface, and the Silence of the Lambs Buffalo Bill. Think about 3 horror movies that have almost transformed the horror community that are based off of one man. Now, these movies have terrified generations of movie audiences, but they aren't quite as chilling as the real-life story of Ed Gein himself. So, the next time you go to see Psycho, or you watch a story or a movie or a TV show about Norman Bates, remember, it's really Ed Gein's. And the next time you see a Texas Chainsaw wielding maniac with a face cut off of somebody else and put it on his own face, remember, that was inspired by Ed Gein's.